And welcome to Unity of Charlotte, where our mission is to nurture a deep and mature experience of God through the practice of unity principles. And I am excited to have you all here in our sanctuary. And aren't we happy to have all those people with us on Zoom? Clap for them too. Yay! And there are 10 so far, and you know what happens when the rest of them get their cup of coffee and get on the couch. So we welcome all of you here and here through Zoom. And then again, those that join us through YouTube, and we do have a consistent large crowd that joins us on YouTube as well. So I'm Reverend Pat Dre, and the truth is, it is May 1st, and I am delighted to be here with all of you. It is exciting to feel life evolving in a beautiful way in the springtime and in our hearts. So we're going to start today's service by sharing our statement of oneness, and do engage in the statement of oneness through all of your senses as you say it. There is one presence and one power in my life and the universe, God, the good, omnipotent. And now that moves us into the daily word today, which is joy. How perfect is that? Joy, I carry joy in my heart. So take a deep breath and let it go. And feel this beautiful prayer. Many happy experiences and memories may lead me to feel joyful, but I know that they are not the source of my joy. One of my divine gifts, joy is part of my spiritual identity, as close to me as my next breath. Joy wells up and spills over within me when I bring my awareness to my spiritual nature and to my oneness with all good and all life. It is an attitude I hold in mind and a feeling in my heart. The happiness I feel in life depends on my allowing my inner wellspring of joy to come forth. I nurture my joy by maintaining a regular prayer practice that enhances my awareness of God, and by making time for the things that make me the happiest. I go into the world grateful for the joy that resides within me, my gift to share generously. And we are so grateful for Daily Word, a copyrighted and trademarked creative endeavor from Unity Worldwide. I'm reminded of our principles, the 5 principles, and I'll just highlight this wonderful book. It's one of several on the 5 principles. Ellen Davenport, it's one of the best. And when she speaks about the 5 principles, especially the first one, that God is good, we remember that really our journey on this plane is one of knowing that God is good and God is within. And there's a difference between knowing in the top of your head and embedding this in your heart and in your 5 senses. In other words, knowing it all the time, wherever you go, whoever you talk to, and whatever you do. What a great song. And now for our announcements. We have a number of things that are happening here at Unity of Charlotte. And the affirmative prayer meditation is on Tuesday evenings at 7:15 via Zoom. I look for those links at our website. It's a wonderful way to engage in a meditation process that affirms the health of the planet and harmony in the world. And by joining it, you'll get an extra boost to your own meditation practice. And I have that, you have that from me. And that's what happened to me as a part of my participation. The creative thinking group meets on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. via Zoom. We've just started a new book. It is a delightful book, The Creative Thinking with Lucille Cederkranz. And one of the things that's really lovely about this particular episode in this ongoing endeavor that's now at least 4 years in its process is that each chapter that we move through has some really nice things that you can carry into your week with joy. The men's group meets in person at the church on the second and fourth Wednesdays at 9:30 a.m. And a couple of special announcements. We have, I have to move with two pieces, two hands. Reverend Robin Volker has a self-awareness class that meets this coming Tuesday, May 3rd through June 21st. And it goes from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And in this class, she will explore the dimensions of the self and and participants will become more conscious of their attitudes, beliefs, and ways of being. Boy, doesn't that sound enticing? So consider that. You do have to email Reverend Robin Volker, but her contact information is on our website. And there's a small fee for that. It's $75. The affirmative, we already talked about that. We already talked about all of those. And we have our wonderful Brenda Duffy is doing a book launch in Louisville, Kentucky on May 20th to 21st. So we're excited for you, Brenda, and we'll be offering a little more information on that. And who knows, there may be a book launch in Charlotte. I'm just planting that seed out there. We'll see what happens. For our wonderful Horace Bush, he is recovering and he will need support after he gets home from hospital and rehab. And so if you would like to support him, you can reach out to me or to Barbara Rolfe and we will connect you up. So those are our announcements. I did want to mention that when you get your announcement of the service on Sunday, it's kind of interesting because there's usually a very lovely contribution by, and this week's was a New Thought contribution, a little brief but compelling history of New Thought by Fred Monroe. So look it up and read it. I think you'll find it very interesting. All right. And now we will do the affirmation for our new meeting space and our new minister. So join with me with joy and energy in saying the following. We affirm the presence of a new minister and spiritual home for Unity of Charlotte that fulfills every need for space and use in order to support and share our unified purpose to love, grow, and serve. So it is. And now I am delighted to introduce our speaker today. And this is a very special candidate and candidates that we have been engaged with. Last week, Reverend Jim gave the presentation via Zoom, and it was very compelling. They are a powerful couple. Reverend Lisa is with us today to continue the presentation and the conversation. We'll listen to her service, and then we will leave here fairly quickly, go to the prayer room for the question and answer time, okay? You know we need to make space for our Sikh community that is coming in right after us. Now, to give a fair and passionate introduction of Reverend Lisa is pretty hard to do in one paragraph. She'll speak to her inner light so beautifully that it will glow, and it'll be far better than any introduction I could give her. But she has been involved with Unity for over 12 years. She graduated and was ordained through Unity Worldwide Ministries in 2021. And boy, has she been busy. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology. She has a diverse history of working for large corporations as well, and starting up and working a spiritual retreat center. Currently, she is a member of the Great Lakes Unity Region Board, an instructor for the Spiritual Direction Program at Unity Worldwide Ministries, and a guest speaker at Unity centers across the United States. She, along with her husband, Reverend Jim, look forward to being part of our evolutionary growth within Unity and within our world. And now, give a very warm welcome to Reverend Lisa.
Thank you so much, Reverend Pat. I feel so honored and blessed to have this opportunity to be sharing this Sunday message with you. And both myself and Reverend Jim, who you hopefully have heard from last Sunday, if you watched the message, are both very excited as we're exploring the possibilities and potentialities of perhaps becoming a part of the Unity Charlotte family. Now, if you did watch Reverend Jim's talk last week, you might remember that he kind of took us through the power of imagination and how we use that power of imagination to engage with the field of infinite possibilities to create and manifest a life that expresses who we are. Well, that's a very, very exciting idea that we have infinite possibilities available to us. But then I started thinking, well, how then do we ensure the right use of our powers and our creative abilities? If we have infinite possibilities, it means we can create anything. So I started looking at the power of wisdom. And when we use our power of wisdom, we then engage our imagination and that field of infinite possibilities in ways that we ensure we are manifesting our joy, much as we heard in that daily word. If the 12 powers are new to you, imagination and wisdom are part of the 12 powers that were taught by Charles Fillmore, who's the co-founder of Unity, along with his wife, Myrtle. And Charles spoke about these 12 powers or attributes or abilities that are a part of our whole self, our Christ self. And we express through these. And when these 12 powers are fully activated and working in harmony with each other, then we are able to manifest all forms of good, both in our life and in our world. And that's really what we're here to do, isn't it? So we're going to be diving into the specific power of wisdom. And I'd like to start by describing how wisdom in almost all faith traditions or spiritual traditions globally is represented as a feminine principle. We have Sophia, we have Kuan Yin, we have Saraswati, Grandmother Spider, White Buffalo Woman. And even within our Judeo-Christian tradition, even though the female over the years has mostly been written out, there still is in the book of Proverbs infinite wisdom referenced as female. In Proverbs 8:1, it says, "Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand." Beautiful, beautiful passage. So here we see wisdom personified as the feminine. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about more about the feminine and masculine aspects, but I want to be very clear that we're talking about masculine and feminine as principles, as aspects of our whole self, not as gender. So masculine and feminine that we're going to be talking about today has to do with each one of us and how we express ourselves in our wholeness. Well, let's turn to the revealing word. Now, if you don't know, the revealing word is a book created by Charles Fillmore, which defines and gives the metaphysical meanings of people, places, names, and objects. Now, the purpose of a metaphysical interpretation is every story and every sentence has its literal meaning. But when we begin to look at things from a metaphysical perspective, we gain a glimpse and a deeper understanding of who and what we are in a spiritual sense. So beyond the physical. So I turned to the revealing word and I looked up the word woman. And here's what it says. It signifies the intuitive perception of truth. Woman signifies the intuitive, this inner knowing perception of truth, which is reflected into the intellect through the soul. So wisdom comes from within and is our intuitive nature. And this is the metaphysical meaning of woman. Now, if we now look at the metaphysical meaning of wisdom, it says this: intuitive knowing, spiritual intuition, the voice of God within us as our source of understanding. This is a really important aspect of wisdom because it is about that small inner voice. It's the whole reason we turn within in prayer as we go to our quiet place. To hear that voice within us that is the voice of God, the voice of spirit, that voice which comes from an understanding of who we are in our divine nature. Wisdom, that's wisdom. Now I want to turn to look at the intellect a little bit because it's important to know how these work together. And the intellect is the masculine aspect or counterpart of wisdom. And if you think about it, our intellect, our intellectual capacity, we usually build our intellectual capacity by things external to us. It's by things we learn through others, by things we learn through education. It's things we learn through reading books or watching films or exploring the internet. Oh my goodness, how much information do we have available to us at this time just through the internet? But all of those ideas and concepts and knowledge that we gain through external sources builds our intellectual capacity. But it's not necessarily connected to our inner wisdom. And this is what we have to look at. Now, when we talk about our intellectual capacity, we're talking about the ability, let me turn to Reverend Linda Martella-Whitsett. Some of you may know her. She is a unity minister, and she also is the director of Silent Unity. And she wrote a book called Divine Audacity. And I'm going to reference that again later on. But in her book, she talks about our intellect, our intellectual capacity as what our brain just automatically does. within our human expression. It takes in ideas and it connects them, and through those connections creates a meaning and then comes to a conclusion. And then this gets stored away in our memory, in our subconscious or unconscious mind. And we do this throughout our life so quickly and efficiently that often we don't even know what conclusions we're actually drawing. But we're now living from these strongly held beliefs, which seem completely reasonable to us, but may in fact have nothing to do with truth. And so this becomes important because if we rely only on our intellect, we may be making decisions and holding viewpoints that don't really serve understanding and living from the higher truth of who we are. I have a quick story to share of how I see this in my own life. My father transitioned about 6 months ago. And so I've been going home to see my family in Jacksonville, Florida, and we've been gathering as a family rather often during his birthday and to support my mom. And each time we get together, we have a little ritual we've started. My mom has a jar with some colored stones, and we pass the jar around and we share a memory of our father. And then we put a stone in the jar. And each time we get together, we're kind of building this jar of memories. And it's a beautiful ritual. And what I've discovered as I'm sitting here listening to all the memories that we're sharing is that quite often we may be speaking about the exact same event, but how we share it and what our experience of it was are completely different. And I hear that more and more as we're sharing our memories. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it was an interesting thing to note that how someone else lived through the exact same experience I lived through, they came out of it with a much different connection of ideas, a much different sense of meaning and conclusion. And now they're living their life through that perception, much as I'm living through mine, and much as we all live through ours. So the intellect is an accumulation of ideas, but it's not necessarily wise. It can judge and discern and make decisions, but often it's doing that from a perspective of being separate from everyone and everything. And if it's not balanced with wisdom, which comes from a perspective of wholeness and connectedness, then we end up much of what we're experiencing today. So I'd like to share something from Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who puts this so brilliantly that I would just love to share it with you. This is from his essay called The World House. He says, every man lives in two realms, the internal and the external. The internal is that realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, and religion. Spiritual ends from the internal. The external is that of complex devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by means of which we live. So he's really saying the internal provides us the ends for why we're living. What is our purpose for being here? Those are spiritual ends. The external is meant to be the devices and the instrumentalities by the means by which we're able to express that. But he says our problem today is that we have allowed the internal to become lost in the external. We have allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. This is the serious predicament, the deep and haunting problem confronting modern man. When scientific power outruns moral power, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men. When our external capacities or intellectual capacities have outdistanced our spiritual understanding and grounding, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men. When we foolishly minimize the internal of our lives and maximize the external, we sign the warrant for our own day of doom. Whew. That's a heavy message, but it's an important one. And I think it's what we're seeing being manifested in our world today. However, it's not the end of our story, is it? It is not the end of our story. It's where we stand in this great evolutionary moment with the chance to begin to awaken once again our power of wisdom, and to begin to connect that and feed that into our intellect so that we can begin to move forward, even in this human existence, in a way that transforms, that heals, and that connects us once again as this single family that we are. So the intellect is led by outer influences. And because it sees the world of separate parts and people disconnected one from the other, it tends to think that power is control over or a subjugation of others and of nature, our natural world. It thinks abundance or prosperity is amassing things by taking it away from others. Wisdom, which is guided by internal influences, by our connection to our divine identity, understands wholeness. And it then guides the intellect from this fearless perspective and recognizes that abundance happens through generosity, and that power can only be realized by empowering everyone and everything. And when we live from this place, then we begin to create a world of harmony, of community, and manifest a life where that light, that divine nature in every single thing is acknowledged and recognized and honored. That's the possibility we have before us. So that brings me to the question of, how do we activate this power of wisdom within us? How do we bring that forward and begin to use that as our guide and inspiration for our intellectual pursuits, and how we make our decisions, how we judge and discern and move forward in action? Well, this is where I'm going to go back to Reverend Linda Martella Whitsitt, because in her book, Divine Audacity, as she's talking about wisdom, she says, we activate this power through the practice of surrender. Surrender. It's an interesting word, because often when we hear that word, we tend to feel that it's about giving up power, about being submissive. But I'd like to present how she expresses it, because I think it's a very powerful way of looking at surrender. She says there's two actions to surrender. One, the first one is release and let go of your limited self-identity, which comes from insecurity and scarcity. We let that go. Any of those beliefs we've held on to that tell us we are less than, or not enough, or separate from, we let go of and release. The second action, though, is that as we do that, we then allow. She calls it yielding or allowing our spirit to our spiritual nature and our divine identity. Because she says when we do this, we give way for the wisdom of ourself with capital S to arise in our awareness. So wisdom is not something we have to earn or create. Wisdom is already there, lying within us, just waiting to be realized and allowed to come forth. She says, in allowing, my finite self is opening to my infinite self, which we also know within unity as our Christ consciousness or our divine identity. Surrender. It's a beautiful thing, because when we open ourselves up to the universal wisdom that's always been within us, that then informs our intellect. It informs our ability to understand, to perceive in a much broader way from a perspective of wholeness, so that the decisions and the actions we take will be ones of healing, of transformation, and of love and connection. And this is the great opportunity we stand in this day, in this time, in this period of history, in this great evolutionary process of human consciousness. So, in just a quick summary of what we've just covered, we looked at the idea of wisdom as that feminine aspect, typically defined as feminine across most faith traditions, and we recognize it as the intuitive perception of truth. It is a knowing that comes when we are connected to and living from our spiritual consciousness and the awareness of our Christness. We understand intellect as a counterpart of this, and that the intellect is meant to serve, as Charles Fillmore would say, the executive office of the wisdom. We need the intellect. The intellect is not bad. It is not evil. It is our ability and our capacity in our human existence to bring wisdom through us and manifest as love and joy and light in this world. It is what allows us to function in our human existence. And when it's guided and inspired by our inner wisdom, we then manifest all good. Finally, it requires a daily practice. It's a daily practice. It's a muscle we're building to continue to recognize when we are coming from a limited belief, and to shift our awareness to let that go, and then allow for our perception of ourself as a finite consciousness to one of an expanded consciousness. And when we do that, wisdom naturally begins to express itself. And when we move into this conscious awareness, we begin to live from a recognition of the sacredness of all life and all beings. Our interconnectedness to ourselves and our interconnectedness to nature. So what I would like to offer you now is an opportunity to come into a few moments of meditation. Let's take this idea of wisdom, this understanding, and let's now turn within and really begin to open up and allow that to express through us. So I invite you, if it's comfortable, to sit back and to gently close your eyes and begin to just focus on your breath. Just take a moment to notice the air coming in when you inhale and filling your lungs. And on the exhale, feel yourself just relax a little more into this present moment. Your shoulders drop a little more, your face relaxes, and you sit back a little more comfortably. And on the next inhale, feel that breath coming in and filling the body with life-giving oxygen and light. And on the exhale, feel any tension of the mind, any worry and anxiety or stress just flow out. And let your mind simply rest in a clear, open space. Now I invite you to move your focus and your attention to a spot just below your heart, kind of between your heart and your stomach, right there in the solar plexus area. Put your attention right there and imagine a light. This is considered the center of wisdom. Imagine a light right in your solar plexus, right under the heart. And that light is yellow, the color yellow. Just take a moment to focus all your attention right there and see that light shining a beautiful yellow color. I'm going to give you some words of affirmation to say before we move into a few moments of silence. But you find the words that resonate with you. If these don't, find your own words that resonate. The Christ in me now activates wisdom. I perceive beyond appearances and am guided by divine intuition into wise and perfect ways. The Christ in me now activates wisdom. I perceive beyond appearances and am guided by divine intuition into wise and perfect ways. One more time as we move into silence. The Christ in me now activates wisdom. I perceive beyond appearances and am guided by divine intuition into wise and perfect ways. And when you're ready, gently and with grace, allow your focus to come back to this present moment, to the physical space you are in, to the sensations of your physical form. You might wiggle your toes or your fingers, shift in your chair just a little to bring yourself back to this present moment. But know that you carry this wisdom with you always. It is an inherent quality and capacity that you have to guide you in sure and joyful ways. And as you open your eyes and return to the room, I just say, I love you. I bless you. I behold the living Christ presence within you. You are the wise one who has come to transform the world. Namaste. And so it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Lisa. We appreciate your message. We are so grateful for that wonderful message, Reverend Lisa, reminding us of our power, the wisdom, and the universal wisdom that resides within, and also reminding us to surrender our limited self-identity for that spiritual identity that then transforms us in love and connectedness to all that is. We are so grateful to you and grateful that you'll be joining us after the service in the prayer room for questions and answers. And I know it'll be lively, as it was lively last week with Reverend Jim. And now for our offertory. And you have no way of knowing this, Reverend Lisa, but the congregation is still in meditation. My goodness, I'm looking out and people are just like trying to be here. So that was a very powerful, powerful meditation. Thank you. In our offertory, I think the offertory theme is so much of what we've been talking about today, these principles that we live by and the ways we stay connected to the great spiritual identity that we are, that we all belong to. And so please join with me in knowing prosperity for our entire congregation and for your loved ones that are also desiring prosperity. Joyously, I give this gift, knowing the divine presence blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God.